Hey guys. So look, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I finally found my pants. The bad news is, just don't get mad. I just don't have a video for you guys this month. I finally finished grad school last month and I've been told I have to look for a job. Like, what? I don't know if you've heard, I'm an influencer. I think my mind's just been all over the place. I need to go for a walk, clear my head, go touch some grass, get outside for a little while, and everything's going to be way better when I get back. I think I know the perfect place. It's going to be great. See you guys on the other side. What do you do when you're stuck in a room with nothing but evil around you? What things do you notice? What do you remember? What was the last room you were in? Which way did you come from? Which way did you turn? Which corner, which door, which hallway, which hopeful gleam will get you that much closer to safety? Where was that thing? Where was that thing I saw? Where was that lock to this key that I found? You backtrack, back and forth again. The familiar spaces either etch their angles into your mind or blend into one another, making it difficult to recall where you've been and where you're going. You need to listen for noise, judging its proximity and direction, all the while keeping your movements as quiet and unassuming as possible. You need to keep the lights on and keep your eyes open, all the while knowing that if you can see that thing, that pale figure, that uneven shadow, that murderous glare, then it's all too likely that it can see you, too. Remothered is a Resident Evil-style horror-adventure duology, which is directed by Chris Darrell and developed by Stormmind Games. The duology kicks off with Remothered Tormented Fathers, which released on console and PC in 2018, then concluded with Remothered Broken Porcelain, which released in 2020. Now, on paper, these two games are my favorite games of all time, or rather, they should be. Some of you may know that I've made my own game called Waning, which is playable if you have the Media Molecule game Dreams, which came out in 2020. If you want to play it, I'd recommend doing so on a PS4 Pro or PS5. The frame rate is 1,000 times better. I'm not the best at optimizing, as it turns out. I was just coming off the high of playing the absolute shit out of Resident Evil 2 Remake, which is one of my favorite games of all time. Now, honestly, I'd never played the original Resident Evil 2, but I'm almost certain I wouldn't like it as much as I do the remake. For those who don't know, Resident Evil 2 Remake was released by Capcom back in 2019 and places you in the Raccoon City police station, which is effectively a giant hedge maze, with different paths that open up as you solve puzzles. The enemies are potentially persistent, and what I mean by that is, when you kill a zombie, you don't know that it is truly dead. It may spring back up at any point, so you might be backtracking through an area, thinking it's safe, only to get your legs snatched by a zombie you thought you'd killed. Depending on your health and resource management, this might spell game over for you. It's an interesting form of emergent gameplay that's uniquely suited to the survival horror genre. It makes even fallen enemies a terrifying force and makes you choose between conserving ammo to get by in the short term or using your precious ammo to ensure that enemies won't block your path later. And then, of course, there's Mr. X. Mr. X is an invincible, powerful force who searches for you around several areas of the police station, only granting you reprieve when you step inside a safe room or move outside his area of engagement. He is slow-moving but tough, and occasionally springs out from behind a wall to attack you when you least expect him. He creates a sort of moving barrier, one you can push past if you're fearless enough, but one that might convince you it's better to just turn and run and perhaps find a different way forward. The first three levels, the police station proper, the underground parking lot, and the sewers are all interconnected, with the only gated off level being the endgame lab.
Welcome to Nest. Enjoy your visit.
This means that even though there's a set path forward, there's a lot of room for players to uncover the secrets of the police station and the solutions to puzzles in their own order, at their own pace. The alternate A and B scenarios, which follow major story beats but with alternate paths and key items, do a great job of highlighting the versatility of this labyrinthine world. I think RE2 Remake's biggest downfall is that it has no significant DLC and doesn't feature some sort of map editor for players to replow the path for others to go through. Like, a modder named Ben Powell released an RE2 Remake randomizer, and I'm not kidding when I say that even just switching where the items are adds hours of new and fun gameplay to experience in this world. It completely changes the way you need to think about going through the maze. So imagine being able to change enemy placement and start and end locations as well. You could create your own fun obstacle courses and escape rooms for others to challenge and try to get the best times. They would be user-generated survivor modes like the few that are in RE2 Remake. It would be a fuck ton better than some dumb multiplayer game no one asked for, Capcom. Anyway, so when I made my game, I wanted to capture what I loved about Resident Evil 2 Remake. Back in undergraduate school, I was obsessed with what I called concentrated open world. It was the idea of trapping the player in an enclosed space, like a mansion or a complex, but having each individual room within that space be fully explorable with procedural items to find. That was the original concept I had for Waning, but until Dreams came out, I couldn't possibly make anything like it. Fast forward to 2019 when Dreams is released, and then fast forward again to 2021 when I released Waning, and you'll notice I had to compromise quite a bit on my original vision. You follow Emily, a 19-year-old young woman who ends up at the Wavering Mansion where she must battle the dark creatures and uncover the mansion's mysteries and come to terms with her own personal struggles about sex addiction and her crumbling relationship with her devoutly religious mother. This is already a big step from my original story concept, and in terms of the gameplay, some ideas stayed, but a lot had to change as well. The world is smaller, its items aren't procedural, and there are far fewer monsters and gadgets to unlock. Also, I was dealing with having to create everything through Dreams, so censorship was a frustrating issue I had to constantly be aware of. So in essence, I reduced Waning to several core ideas. Number 1, a big maze-like space for the player to explore, to find secrets, shortcuts, and solve puzzles to unlock the path forward. Number 2, several persistent and very hard to kill enemies which stalk you around the maze-like space. Number 3, Legend of Zelda style gadgets and upgrades which help open up new paths and uncover solutions to puzzles which broaden the overall game world. As I built this small-scale game world, which I'm learning might be one of the longest complete games on Dreams, I stayed true to those 3 core tenets to guide the project's vision. I'm going to release a deep dive into my game sometime in the future, maybe after I release this 2.0 update that I've been working on for the past month or so. But if you want to see a full playthrough of it, you should check out the absolute legends channel, Gaming from Canada, who actually played through the whole thing and he seemed to like it. But what does this all have to do with Remothered? Well, on paper, Remothered has almost everything I set out to accomplish with my Dreams game. It has the maze-like world trapping the player in. It has the persistent enemy stalking you, Mr. X style, through the maze. The only thing it lacks is Zelda-style gadgets and upgrades, but to be fair, even Resident Evil and Silent Hill don't really have those. So, is this me saying that Remothered is my favorite game series of all time? Well, not quite. Let me explain. Remothered, Tormented Fathers, and Broken Porcelain are presented with an over-the-shoulder camera view. I don't often talk about camera angles in video games, despite it arguably being one of the more fundamental parts to considering how a game flows and does what it does. There was a ton of hay made over Cyberpunk 2077's first-person camera before that game came out, and while I agreed with the knee-jerk disappointment, I think a lot of care went into framing cutscenes and other moments in a way I found interesting and engaging.
Doesn't look like your average bust.
'Cause they ain't your average badges. That's Max Tack.
Monsters. Fucking monsters!
Anyway, when you play a game, a camera angle is literally one of the first things presented to you. In some ways, it can seem aesthetic, but perspective is important to the point that it can define an entire genre of games. Is this an isometric game? Is it first-person horror? Is it a top-down RPG? Is it a side-scroller? The camera angle is fundamental to how any game operates. And I don't mean this on a purely symbolic level. I mean literally, if you could open up the hood and see what makes a game tick, which is not literal, it's figurative, but whatever. If you could see what makes a game tick, you would find out that games simply work differently depending on what perspective the player has.
And in this particular scene, Zelda's attention is caught by her father, and the camera is at a very specific angle. And you can still see Zelda blinking, despite the fact that it's nearly off screen. Now, you'd be surprised how aware the animators were of this, because when you turn the camera over, you can find out that only one of her eyes is blinking. Which makes it look like that she's got a twitch in her eye.
First-person games, for instance, to save on graphics resources, might only render what appears in front of the player character. Most first-person games don't even utilize a full character model for the player character because the player will never get to see it.
When an NPC is loaded, it will react to obstacles and other NPCs. An NPC will remain loaded as long as it or the room that it is located in is visible. When an NPC is unloaded, it will completely ignore and run straight through obstacles and even doors. This ends up being a pretty important dynamic because, as you can see, if I keep this first hostage loaded, he has a lot of trouble getting around this chair. But if he was unloaded, he would pass straight through it without a problem.
Back in my Pokemon Arceus video, which you should definitely watch, I talked about the importance of selling the illusion. Suspension of disbelief, the act of a viewer or experiencer of a piece of media dulling their skepticism or scrutiny of the things that would be impossible or improbable in the real world, is a lot harder when there are more ways for the players to interact with a fictional world. You have to apply way more tools and techniques to sell the illusion. Graphical fidelity, sound design, encounter design, stability, polish, these all go a long way in helping to sell the illusion.
Just nod if you can hear me.
It's like, you know that feeling in porn when you're watching a first-person video and they cut to an angle that wouldn't be possible in first person? It's jarring. It takes you out of the experience. It's like, I can't even fap to this anymore. What the fuck? I don't even remember writing this. This idea of the illusion is fundamental in game design. You simply can't show the player everything. It's not possible. It's more possible in open world games, but it still isn't really real. There are still boundaries, and the world doesn't go on forever. The characters don't persist when the camera isn't on them. Now I can say this from experience, when you're making a game, what the player can see or what you think the player can see factors into how you decide your game should work. All this is to say that Remothered uses one of my favorite camera angles in any game ever, over the shoulder. I feel like over-the-shoulder cameras find an amazing balance between showing the player character off in great detail while also keeping the player immersed in the greater detail of the game world. It makes the player feel small and it makes the experience more intimate while still showing off all the information the player needs to know about the world or obscuring some of the information from view. I use it in Waning, obviously, but then there's also God of War, The Last of Us, Resident Evil 2 Remake, A Plague Tale Innocence, Metal Gear Solid 5, and many other games. So already seeing this camera angle, I'm like, I fucking love this game. Now the camera angle I used in Tormented Fathers and Broken Porcelain is zoomed in more than the default settings, and no, it's not because I wanted a better look at that ass. I decreased the field of view because I wanted to limit what I could see, and it really helped make my overall experience of both games feel more tense and even scary at times. People who declare adamantly that graphics don't matter really are ignoring how much graphics, style, and presentation can add to or detract from an experience. Our eyes are two of the main things humans use to interface with and understand the world, so of fucking course graphics quality matters unless you're actually literally blind. But what about the gameplay itself? Both Remothered games follow a similar game design philosophy. You're trapped in a big house with no way out. Something big and creepy and evil is stalking you, and it won't stop chasing you until presumably it's slathered in your blood and flesh. And you're looking for something. In the first game, you're mostly looking for an exit, but you're also looking for answers.
What has really happened to your daughter?
I just told you.
How about the off-the-record version?
I am not sure where you're trying to go with this, but I won't tolerate. I don't have the strength for this now.
In the second game, well, you're kind of just looking for whatever. It makes the whole experience kind of annoying because there are all these gigantic windows and exits the player could feasibly use to, like, not be there anymore. But the player character seems content to just stay there while murderous demons are chasing her around. There's this especially annoying moment where she makes it outside and then, like, goes back inside to escape the groundkeeper looking for her. This moment is especially annoying because it takes a few cues from The Last of Us, sacrificing consistency for a quote-unquote scary gameplay moment. Look, I love The Last of Us, Part 2 less so, but fuck this kind of game design. How does she see me if I'm literally behind a wall?
Dear God, she see me.
Anyway, these games make some really logical and fun choices with this premise. These are choices I would unknowingly steal in my own game. Like, I'd never played Remothered before making Waning, so it's interesting to see how the same premise can lead to a lot of the same decisions and even some different decisions surrounding stealth and horror mechanics. Weirdly, for this reason, I actually think The Last of Us is a pretty good comparison to make, specifically for the second game. It's pretty obvious to me that The Last of Us inspired some of the major game design differences between the first game and the second, such as making the moment-to-moment gameplay more action-oriented, but I will get to that later. So, you're in a big place, and something is chasing you. Some questions necessarily follow. Firstly, where am I? Well, you're not just in a normal working class or middle class household, no, you have to be somewhere big, somewhere with a veneer of wealth and opulence despite the horror setting. The reason for this is that you need to be in a place which has interlocking pathways. There need to be multiple avenues to the same destination. It's the reason why Resident Evil 1 is in a mansion, Resident Evil 2 is in a police station that used to be a museum, and Silent Hill 2 takes you to a prison complex and a hotel and a hospital. These are gigantic structures built to accommodate a wide and diverse array of foot traffic. Remothered Tormented Fathers takes place in a mansion, which my game also takes place in. Goddamn, I just stole their whole game, didn't I? Anyway, Broken Porcelain takes place in an Italian hotel, doubling as a home for troubled youth out in the countryside somewhere. For sheltered city dwellers like myself, you can imagine it as a sort of country club with a big campus and multiple buildings and single rooms for its guests, but like partially specifically made to house juvenile delinquent girls. Wish I had a place this fucking nice to stay in, Jesus Christ. Frustratingly, I think the second game sort of fails to make the play area feel interlocking with multiple paths forward. For the most part, the gameplay scenarios keep you bound to a specific area of the complex, and the objectives don't really allow for multiple routes to take. It's this weird disconnect where I know the world is fairly vast and complex, but it still feels very linear. And this is where I have to make the distinction between a linear game and a linear world. A linear game is obviously a game with a set starting point and a set path forward to the ending. It doesn't allow for many choices that will alter the course of the storyline. A linear world is something like Uncharted's world, where you start on one end of the map and move to the other end to progress the story. You can't often go back the way you came, and nothing you can do in-game will change the fact that in order to keep going, you need to reach the endpoint of whatever map or scenario you're in. Many linear games have semi-open worlds, meaning there are a lot of different ways the player can choose to go at any given time, but ultimately they lead to the same end goal. Both Remothered games are linear games, but Tormented Fathers feels like a much bigger world than Broken Porcelain does. Broken Porcelain, while having the wide labyrinthine areas the same as its predecessor, feels like an incredibly linear world. The stuff the game tasks me to do always takes me on a fairly straightforward path from my starting point to my destination, and there are so many locked doors that probably lead nowhere that the game hits you with right off the bat. So, fun fact, Remothered Broken Porcelain runs on Unreal Engine 4, which means I have default access to a free camera and a debug console. With the free camera, I was able to see that yes, I was right. These doors don't lead anywhere. Not even in theory. They just lead to dead ends. They're just there for show, and you can feel it as you're playing the game. In Silent Hill 2, this sort of thing augments the fear. Holy shit, another locked door? How do I get to where I need to go before the monster catches me? In Resident Evil 2 Remake, a locked door informs you that you need to solve a puzzle or find a way around. In both cases, the locked doors make the world feel bigger, like there's always more to find. In Broken Porcelain, I learned early on that the locked doors would never unlock. Rather, only specific story beats would lead me through any inaccessible doors, and many doors would simply remain inaccessible forever.
Damn, it's locked.
This makes the world feel very small and linear. There's typically only one real path from my goal to my destination. Like here, for instance, this door is locked for what feels like the majority of the game, but it does open up a shortcut at the end. But by the time the door is accessible, there's no need for the shortcut. And also, it's not a shortcut that I found. It feels so unsatisfying when I spend so much time trying to open this door, and it finally gets unlocked off screen and leads to an area that I've been going to the entire game. There's even a shortcut unlocked after you access the balcony that in my second playthrough I thought might be pretty useful for connecting two far parts of the resort, but the game straight up doesn't let you use it anymore. But the button indicator is still there. What the fuck? Broken Porcelain does some cool stuff toward the end with certain shortcuts being hidden paths that you wouldn't notice at first glance. I really like that, but for the most part, there's just one way to get to where you need to go in the game. Frustratingly, the game even warps you to other maps that aren't connected to the main map. Like, this is inevitable in any game, even open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2 takes you to Tahiti, where without the use of some major glitches, you're unable to go back to. And of course, linear games do this all the time. Hell, I even do it in my game, although I found cool ways to allow players to explore some areas again. I don't think I'm alone in saying this, but one of the most frustrating things as a player is learning that the world you're experiencing is finite and incomplete. And obviously, these worlds have to be finite and incomplete. It would be impossible for a developer to consider every possible interaction or map out every possible location. But even understanding that, it doesn't make the sting less potent. One of my favorite maps in Metal Gear Online 2 is Urban Ultimatum. I just love exploring abandoned urban architecture like alleyways and fire escapes. Gee, I wonder where all this footage came from. And Urban Ultimatum is a very multi-layered map featuring interlocking avenues and a vast range of height levels from the underground tunnels to the rooftops. But there's this one part of the map, a gated off enclosure leading to a set of fire escapes stretching upwards to who knows where. That's the portion of the map I was always fixated on. I always wanted to break inside that enclosure and climb those steps, figure out where those fire escapes leaded. Obviously, I know now that beyond what I can see is probably an endless void of nothingness, or at least definitely nothing worth experiencing, but still, that enclosure captivated me. I think it was the reason I couldn't stop thinking of that game concept, concentrated open world. I wanted to be able to climb those fire escapes. I wanted to be able to see what the game was hiding in plain sight. The map design in Broken Porcelain does the opposite. It encourages me to embrace the familiar and avoid the unfamiliar. In both games, when you're spotted by an enemy, the best way of escaping them is to sprint until you break their line of sight and then find a place to hide. Tormented Fathers encouraged me to find new ways around, find shortcuts to get to where I wanted to go, or to get around an overzealous stalker. Broken Porcelain, on the other hand, encouraged me to just keep going back to the same hiding spots. Your sprinting velocity is way faster than the enemy's movement speed, which is normal in these kinds of horror games, so you can comfortably, almost robotically, escape an enemy the same exact way every single time. Even though the fucking hiding out minigame when you're inside like a dresser or something and they check you is impossible to do when you haven't upgraded that ability, which is very annoying. I digress. While Tormented Fathers and something like Resident Evil 2 Remake encouraged me to find new ways of escape so I could keep making progress, Broken Porcelain taught me early on that there was no other way to get to where I needed to go. The second question that follows from this gameplay premise is, how do I avoid being caught? The simple answer is hide, and the follow-up is how? Not every potential interaction is available in every game, and I still find it frustrating in games that insist on stealth like The Last of Us Part 2 or Horizon Forbidden West when I can't move the bodies of people I've taken down. So in any given game, particularly stealth horror games, you find yourself asking, what tools do I have to fend off the evil entity chasing me? Remothered gives you quite a few options, and it can be a little overwhelming keeping them all in mind as you play through the games. You can hide in wardrobes and under couches, and you can use ropes to tie doors, which blocks off an enemy's path, but also your own, and you can place sound lures and other traps to stall enemies or keep them distracted. Broken Porcelain goes even more overboard, adding a full-on skill upgrade system. This is one of the ways it takes after The Last of Us, but again, I'll talk about that later. Most of the combat and stealth in these games, especially in the first game, revolves around fending off enemies, luring them away, and stalling them. It's a very passive form of action, and for the most part, I really love it. Because of the map design, you can often get blindsided by stalkers coming up around a corner, and after dodging an enemy attack, which you can do if your stamina is high enough, you might sometimes get stuck with no ability to move between your stalker and a wall. These are general flaws, obviously, but it doesn't change the fact that your best bet is to use sound and shortcuts to stay out of the enemy's sight and to go where they are not. In this respect, Tormented Father specifically is not like The Last of Us at all. It feels more tense and scarier because your best bet is to avoid enemies altogether. Again, the easiest way to get out of conflict in my experience was just to run away and break line of sight, then circle around to my destination. But in the first game particularly, the level design and encounter design made the experience very thrilling, especially during 3 specific moments. The first moment is early on, after solving one of the first major puzzles of the game. All of the lights go out while you're being stalked by one of the mansion dwellers, and it's a slight change, but it's really powerful. You'd think no light would be a good thing, decreases the stalker's visibility, right? But it also means you have to rely on mostly just your ears for discerning where your stalker is at any given time. The game very subtly uses the music to inform the player of how close a stalker is, with each of the different stalkers having their own music and with dissonant musical effects playing only when a respective stalker is close.
Nothing left to eat. It's all moldy.
Beyond that, there's no map in this game, a choice I would shamelessly steal for my own game, mostly because I couldn't figure out how to program a map in Dreams. This might seem like a design flaw at first, but it's not. The gameplay area isn't overwhelmingly large, and most of its rooms are pretty distinct, so the lack of a map informs the player that they will be memorizing the gameplay space and plotting out in their minds what the best routes are for getting from one place to another. By the time the lights go out, you should have a good sense for where the major areas are, and if you were paying attention earlier in the game when you were allowed to sort of explore the beginning areas, you'll even know where the power switch is to turn the lights back on. So, while the sequence doesn't last terribly long, it's reinforcing the fact that you should be familiarizing yourself with passageways, shortcuts, and puzzle locations. The second most memorable sequence for me is one of the few examples of a jump scare I actually like and thought was executed incredibly well. I think it works so well because it's a fake out. You examine this photograph, get a cutscene of a new potential stalker coming up from behind you, then it vanishes. Typical horror trope, right? But wait a minute, as you turn to leave, this one was really good. I really liked it. The third sequence I really like in Tormented Fathers is when you finally reach Celeste's bedroom. I'll explain all the characters later. This series of story is fucking wild. But you interact with the tape recorder and then get ambushed by this moth lady, and the game cleverly communicates that you need to avoid looking at the moth lady.
Don't look at it. Turn around. What you see is not you. It's all in your head. And moves before you hear. Destroy what scares you. Destroy them. Destroy your fears. It's all in your head. Mirrors don't have any power over you, but you do over them. Smash them. It's all in your head. Don't look at them. Turn around.
What the game doesn't communicate so well is that you need to use the bricks in the doorway to destroy the mirrors in the bedroom. What I think I knew at the time was that I had to destroy the mirrors, but because I hadn't been using tools very much, I didn't know throwing things to break other things was even a mechanic. Also, one of the mirrors doesn't break at all, and it seems like it's missing a texture. Not sure what that's about. In fact, there are a few mirrors in the game which seem like they're missing textures. Maybe one of my settings is fucked up. I don't really know. These three sequences were memorable to me and stick out as really good moments. Tormented Fathers isn't perfect. The sewer sequence and the subsequent basement and attic sequences are particular annoyances for me. And unlike Resident Evil or Silent Hill, you're only ever solving like one or two puzzles at a time, so the game world feels much smaller. But for the most part, the first game manages its gameplay elements masterfully. Now, here's where I get to shit on the second game quite a bit. Broken Porcelain decides to take much more of a cinematic and action-oriented approach to game design. The minigame where stalkers check on your hiding spot is damn near impossible until you upgrade the character's abilities, which has the interesting and very likely unintended effect of making you run around more. But now you can vault over obstacles, now you can crawl through loopholes, now you can stealth attack enemies, now you can even crouch sprint. Now you can upgrade your personal skills, which all carry over into a new save file? I think this is intentional. The game also feels much more hand-holdy. I've already spoken about how the map design is a lot more linear, but beyond that, the game wants you to handle specific situations in specific ways, not in ways that make particularly logical sense. With the first real puzzle, for instance, you need to access room 213, which is like Okay, let me back up. First of all, you don't even really know that you want to get in this room. The game gives you an objective saying contact Eliza, who you last saw disappear behind that room door, but A, that's not her room, she's just cleaning it.
Oh, Andrea. I'll start with room 213.
And B, everyone's gone, so there's no reason to assume that she would still be there. Anyway, here's where the game really shows itself to be bad at communicating. You pick up this key and this character Celeste goes,
It's the key for the padlock.
I've played through this section twice and I still have no fucking clue what padlock she's talking about. I guess somehow I missed this my first playthrough, but the phone in the second floor office is locked, presumably with a padlock, and not just the icon of a padlock. Just to be clear, if you interact with the phone while it's locked, the game will zoom in on it and show you the padlock. I missed this my first and second playthrough, and the reason is that the icon showing that the phone is locked is always there while the phone is locked. Meaning, if you move past the phone and just look at it, you'll see that it's locked without ever having to interact with it. That's not usually how these games work. Usually, you have to interact with the object first in order to learn that it's actually locked. And you need this key that is randomly thrown into a washing machine at the exact moment you're nearby to unlock the phone. When you get the key, she doesn't even unlock the phone. It just works.
It works.
Really confusing. Anyway, after Celeste picks up the key, suddenly, for no reason, the power in the building goes out.
You want to play hide and seek?
Wow, you might think this sounds like the similar sequence in Tormented Fathers. No, it's not. Firstly, in Tormented Fathers, the power goes out as the result of the player's actions, and the goal then becomes to sneak through the dark mansion and return the power on so you can complete the puzzle you were trying to complete in the first place. The game even manages to communicate to you that you need to explore the mansion further to figure out where the emergency electrical switch is. As I said, if you explored earlier and were paying attention, you'd know it's on the main level, and there's a cool bright red emergency light that flashes through the dark to let you know that that's where you need to go. The whole sequence is tense and clear. In Broken Porcelain, the power goes out for, again, no reason at all. The cinematic camera awkwardly butts in to show you where to go to return the power on, but I'm still trying to figure out what fucking padlock Celeste is talking about. And also, this is why aesthetics matter in a video game. The hotel is just as brightly lit before the power goes out as after. These red emergency lights are all on now, and all the electrical lights are off, but for me, in my second playthrough, everything looked pretty much unchanged. In fact, the light next to the phone I need to use is still on. The game uses a mix of electrical lamps, which look like old school lanterns, and actual manually lit candles. This candelabra is probably a real one, but it's confusing if I see the light on and nothing really appears to have changed all that much, because I'm just going to keep going about my business, which I did, and was subsequently confused about why the phone wasn't working. And wait a minute, after you investigate the power outage, does suddenly the phone just starts working again? So, hey everyone, this is me from the future. I was looking over this footage and it didn't seem right to me. It didn't make sense to me that I would have had to investigate the electrical panel before being able to use the phone. So, you know, and I was looking over the footage and I noticed that when I was calling, this is footage from my second playthrough, when I was calling the number, room 213, the busy tone actually was playing before I finished dialing the number.
It works!
So I actually went back and tried this puzzle again, and it turns out you can call the room without interacting with the electrical panel, which makes a lot more sense. It only makes the puzzle slightly less hand-holdy, but at least it's a little more logical. It's still an incredibly linear puzzle, and it doesn't make all that much sense in sequence with the power going out by itself for no reason and stuff like that. I also never knew that landline phones can operate without electricity, which is something I just learned today, which is, you know, that's pretty cool. All the same, I was wrong about this particular puzzle. You can call the room before interacting with the electrical panel. So back to the video. Then you need to wander into the room 213 bathroom where something randomly breaks to expose an electrical wire you can then use to repair the panel. This was also done in the first game, by the way, but the pacing of that game makes the whole random thing breaking to expose a puzzle solution far less annoying. This is also where Andrea, our resident stalker, manages to see you despite not possibly being able to do so. This is also where that incredibly useful shortcut you find is no longer usable despite the button prompt still being there. This is what I mean when I say that this game is linear. It's not that it has a set beginning and end, it's that the game seems to actively punish you for doing anything outside of its predetermined structure. There's no inventory screen, so you can't see descriptions of key items you've picked up, or even see any items you picked up at all aside from combat-based items. And it's hard to know what you're even picking up exactly, and what item the object you picked up will replace before you do so. You need to collect moth keys to upgrade Celeste's abilities, and not only does the game not tell you how many moth keys you get when you pick one up, it just says ×1, which is not at all how many you're actually picking up. There's also no way to tell how many you have at any given time unless you're at an upgrade box thing. This means you have no reasonable way of planning your exploration around upgrades, and you're better off just checking the upgrade screen whenever you see the box because you might be able to upgrade something. This is less Resident Evil and more The Last of Us, where you're encouraged to stop at every workbench you see because you never know when or where the next one will be. There's nothing wrong on paper with Broken Porcelain taking elements from The Last of Us, but in the process of trying to make the game more set-piece heavy and action-oriented, without properly thinking through all the ways that that system should be handled and communicated to the player, the developers have made Broken Porcelain a thoroughly incohesive and unwieldy affair. After using the one-time balcony shortcut, you're forced to hide, then sneak around to get a key. Now, first of all, it's dumb as hell that Andrea decides to take a nap right here, right at this very moment while on a murderous rampage. The game also doesn't let you stand up or even open the crafting menu here, and no matter what, when you take the key and interact with the door, she wakes up and starts attacking you again.
Not quite, young lady! What do you want? Come get it! Where were you?
My first playthrough, I thought this would lead to an interesting moment where I would have to sneak up behind her and take the key off her hip or something, but no, the game basically screams at you, "Try stabbing her!" And the process of doing this is so utterly frustrating and unsatisfying. This game simply isn't an action game. The game even has the nerve to fake you out, forcing you to fight her off even more. Fast forward a bit to the sequence where Ashman, the owner of the hotel, starts chasing you around with a gun.
Is this what you were looking for?
Mr. Ashman, please, lower that gun.
I don't want to hurt you. It's not my intention.
And Celeste goes,
The fire extinguisher. Maybe I can use it to my advantage.
Like fucking how? How is a random fire extinguisher going to help me against a gun? The game doesn't even explain how to use the fire extinguisher. Using my big smart logic brain, I figured I could use the fire extinguisher as a defensive weapon to smack him across the head with, but like, I already had knives and other weapons, so why would a fire extinguisher be useful? First off, this motherfucker's AI is bullshit. It's hard to tell what's intentional and what's not. Second off, the game, like all the other times, inexplicably changes the rules to force you to use the solution it wants you to use. Basically, I think this guy can't be stealth attacked, even though the game just taught you how to do that like 10 minutes ago.
You're so slow! Too slow!
And it doesn't explain why either. It's just like,
The fire extinguisher.
So you have to aim the fire extinguisher like a gun and blind him, I guess. But even when you successfully do whatever the fuck the game wants you to do, the motherfucker still grabs you and it still looks like a fail state. I genuinely have no idea what the intention was here. Again, the game really sucks at communicating. In the next gameplay sequence, Celeste unlocks her moth power, so you unlock the door to the freezer, or, excuse me, the cold room, and then trap him inside. And then the motherfucker shoots the door open?
I am your father.
Fuck, I've been
Hands in the air!
What? So you're forced to hide again, and if you don't, you die. I cannot stress enough how on rails this experience feels, which is the polar opposite of what the first game felt like it was trying to achieve. In fact, those moments I mentioned not liking in Tormented Fathers, the sewer chase, the basement chase, the attic chase, those were all the most on rails sections of the game, which is probably one of the reasons why I didn't like them so much. At this point, there are 3 stalkers chasing you, and they really annoyingly don't interact with each other at all. This means that one of them can inspect the hiding place to make sure you're not in there and then walk away, and then another one can walk up right after them to inspect the same hiding place. It would be really annoying if it weren't so funny. Anyway, in one instance of interesting level design in Broken Porcelain, this little bathroom area is a dead end, but there's a loophole you can use to get in and out. Stalkers can't go through loopholes, so theoretically, you could tie the door with a rope to lock it from the inside and then use the loophole as an exit, giving you effectively a safe room of sorts. And hey, look, the game even puts a rope in here. Maybe this is an intentional design choice. This is actually really good, using the interlocking traversal pathways to create interesting solutions to obstacles. Cool shit, developers. Maybe I take back some of what I said before. After using your moth power to get a dog killed, you get chased outside where the red nun from the first game blocks your path. You get saved by Eliza, who was just chasing you literally a minute ago, but she's alright now, I guess.
I'm back to myself. You can trust me.
And you have to complete this kind of The Last of Us / Resident Evil 4 / Watch Dogs-esque kind of buddy stealth situation where you're unblocking paths using your moth power so that your partner can continue forward. Eliza needs to get a key to help you find a way out of the hotel restaurant. The key is in the bathroom, so you distract the red nun, and Eliza makes her way to the bathroom door where... Are you serious? I soft locked the game? I can't get out of moth mode here. Normally it's on a timer, but again, the game breaks the rules here to serve the set piece. And because I blocked the fucking door with the rope in the last sequence, Eliza can't get through, which breaks her AI, and I can't undo the rope myself because I'm stuck in moth mode, and there's no way for me to tell Eliza to just go the fuck around, and the last autosave is at the beginning of this stupid buddy section, so I've got to go back to my manual save, which means I have to do the last sequence over again. Fuck you, game! This is the perfect example of how Broken Porcelain's fucking tunnel vision and set-piece heavy design utterly ruins the game experience. It's so on rails that literally any deviation has the potential to kill the game. There's a ton of other stuff and moments to criticize, like there are even boss fights in Broken Porcelain, and oh my god. But we're not doing a frame-by-frame analysis of this thing. The third question that likely follows from this gameplay premise is, why am I here? And the answer, of course, when playing Broken Porcelain is...
just to suffer.
I assure you, I wasn't this mad at Broken Porcelain until I played it through the second time. So why are you here? This is where we start talking about the wild fucking story of this duology. The story's not terribly complicated from a broad view, but it is needlessly dense. I learned on my second playthrough the lengths to which both games go to force a sense of mystery and Shyamalan-esque twists throughout their stories. Okay, time for a disclaimer. This character has two names. I will not be calling them by either name. This isn't out of some weirdo critic obstinance. The reason is out of respect, but mostly because I'm a dumbass and don't know the right thing to do in this situation. The situation being that this character is trans. There isn't anything wrong with that on its face, of course, but this character has been forcibly transed?
People are being transed left and right these days. It's a reasonable thing to be concerned about.
Specifically, this character was born female and made to take massive amounts of testosterone from the time that they were 10 years old to live their life as a man because their father was probably Andrew Tate or some shit. Now, that on its own is a bit of a bad transphobic stereotype that people are made to transition against their will by overbearing parents.
Trans people, we're always on the lookout for the next person we can trans. That's all we want to do. It's trans people. I transed 4 people this morning for a breakfast.
But it gets worse because this person also turns out to be the murderous psycho serial killer who's stalking you throughout the mansion, which is another transphobic stereotype.
The transvestite or transsexual serial killer is an old transphobic trope. It's a cliche that goes back decades. Movies can subconsciously implant ideas and feelings into our brains. And I do think it's worth noting that the most famous and most terrifying murder scene in cinema history is of a man in a dress attacking a woman in a bathroom. To quote a popular film critic, you might not have noticed it, but your brain did.
This character, who I'll be calling X from now on, has very little agency. Aside from a conversation at the beginning of the game, they spend the entirety of Tormented Fathers, tormented, and borderline incoherent as they spend the entirety of Broken Porcelain either off-screen or dead. For that reason, it's hard to know what gender X identifies with personally. The game explains it away by saying that X has a split personality.
Split personality? Unhealthy upbringing by deceased father.
I was a disappointment to him. A wimp.
Overdose of hormones and testosterone.
I once or twice refused to go through exams.
This is why he wouldn't go further through exams. They would have understood. Now I understand why he was obsessed with his growing daughter, and why he started calling her Jennifer. She was everything his father never wanted him to be.
But I want to avoid dead naming and misgendering this fictional character, so X it stands. As I said, the story's not actually all that complicated. A man surnamed Wyman created this drug called phenoxyl to treat post-traumatic stress disorder for war veterans. Phenoxyl uses moths somehow to make people forget their memories, therefore quote-unquote curing their PTSD, but secretly he's been using the drug to create thralls, a hive mind, using the moth as a proxy of which he would be the leader.
By emulating the moth's behavior, phenoxyl can result in a collective hypnosis in which multiple individuals are forced to obey a leader or a mother Acherontia.
Tormented Fathers is the story of how X was given phenoxyl under the guise of curing their PTSD from being forcibly transed, but to actually exact the somewhat convoluted revenge scheme of this woman named Gloria Ashman. More on her later. X began recovering some of the memories of their trauma, which caused X to see themselves as a female in other female family members, namely in their wife and their daughter. This female figure is Jennifer, and to be clear, I'm using the name Jennifer to refer to this female figure construct for clarity's sake and not to X themselves. Jennifer becomes a recurring pseudonym throughout the game, most notably for X's daughter, Celeste, who you play as in the second game.
And this is what my daughter decided to do.
Jennifer.
What did you say?
At times, you'd call her Jennifer.
No.
And who is also suddenly, inexplicably British in the second game?
For God's sake, Jennifer, tell me!
I don't know anymore.
God only knows why I returned. I did miss them. I needed to see them again. At least to know who I am and why I'm Jennifer.
The game takes place in Italy, by the way. Wanting to excise the past, or save this Jennifer figure from future abuse in some twisted way, X begins a killing spree, beginning with their wife and, that's it, just their wife. Celeste, or Jennifer, depending on who you ask, had run away from home back in 1971 and came back sometime after the main events of Broken Porcelain, which, again, we will get to later. After Celeste's return, Gloria Ashman seduced X into killing their wife and almost killing Celeste, but X, in a brief moment of off-screen clarity, helped Celeste escape.
Now I understand. Hilton always told the truth. He just wanted to protect Celeste. From all of this. From himself. From his Jennifer.
You're playing as Lindsay, also known as Lynn, also known as Dr. Reed, which is a pseudonym which you don't realize in the game itself.
Don't do drugs. If you're doing it, stop it. Get some help.
There are hints throughout the game that this woman isn't who she says she is, but this is actually a good time to talk about how ineffective the dialogue is. Both games are either told with this very obtuse, hyper-flowery, ultra-symbolic verbiage which obfuscates its point so intensely that it becomes meaningless.
A name is just a trace. It is our business card, our identifier. It presents us to the world. But does it tell our story or really describe who we are?
I swear I know 3 or 4 idiots with the same exact name.
Well, yes. But we are not made of that name. It is given to us. Other people choose it for us, whether it suits us or not. It doesn't tell us who we really are. That name will not give us any answers.
Or they're told in incredibly direct, unsubtle exposition dumps which come out of nowhere and often reference things the player would have no idea about.
Collective hypnosis. The leader uses a person known as the medium as a channel and amplifier for other subjects. When the medium is surrounded by mirrors to simulate a fragmentation of the mind, the parasites awaken and spread.
You see, Tormented Fathers was written with the sequel entirely in mind, and that's not inherently a bad thing. So it's good that the entire story was more or less planned out while they were writing Tormented Fathers. That's probably more than even Kojima can say, and I'm sure Kojima and Metal Gear are influences for how this story is told.
War has changed. It's no longer about nations, ideologies, or ethnicity.
You can't erase memories forever. It would be like erasing time itself. Memories and time go hand in hand. The consequences would be even more devastating than Alzheimer's disease.
ID tag soldiers carry ID tagged weapons, use ID tag gear. Nanomachines inside their bodies enhance and regulate their abilities. Genetic control, information control, emotion control, battlefield control. Everything is monitored and kept under control.
Fractured by spells of amnesia, hallucinations, and emotional swings, 2 opposing perceptions would coexist, overlapping and threatening one another, to the detriment of the one truth, now shattered, the so-called porcelain memory.
I mean, the guy's studio name is Daryl Arts, come on. But the problem is, Tormented Fathers doesn't leave breadcrumb, oh my god. But the problem is, Tormented Fathers doesn't leave breadcrumbs, it leaves the entire fucking loaf. But the loaf is just sitting there staling, so you kinda can't tell what it is. One example of this is how Gloria keeps calling Reed sister, because Gloria somehow knows that Reed is actually Lindsay, who escaped from an old convent with her when it burned down.
You could have been one of us.
No, I couldn't have.
Yes, you could have, sister. But I could never forget that day. Oh, the screams, the flames. How could you?
You wanted to propagate it as a sign of God. This was not a gift. This was not from God. It was fucking stupid science. And those 2 things have never been compatible.
We believed it. It's true, and we were wrong. But you left us there to die.
But the player doesn't know any of this, and it won't get revealed until the end of the next game, which comes out 2 years later. So even though I played these games back to back, I'm left listening to this cutscene like, did I miss something? Broken Porcelain is even worse because it's told completely out of order, and while jumping back and forth feels more satisfying toward the end of the game, in the beginning it's just like, what the fuck is going on? Who are these characters? Am I Jennifer or Celeste? What's a Maniston?
Did Mr. Ashman have something to do with it?
Shh! Lower your voice! You'll get us thrown out of here. It seems that Mr. Ashman had the bad habit of touching his little sister.
Where did that come from? Why the fuck did you tell me that? What the hell? Couple that with multiple first names and last names and fake names for the different characters and sometimes multiple genders and drastic, spurious shifts in personality from one moment to another, Broken Porcelain is a thoroughly messy affair. It's clearly trying to be this grand cinematic gesture, and in terms of graphics and music and presentation, I think it succeeds pretty well. But in every other aspect, it really loses its footing with everything it's trying to do. Celeste, or Jennifer, your main point of view character in Broken Porcelain, spent some time in a different juvenile girl's home before being transferred to this place, where she meets Lindsay, aka Lynn, aka Reed, who at this time is just 15 years old. That's one of the big plot twists, is that Lynn has been searching for her childhood love for decades. It's cute, and I think this scene in particular is very cute. But this is the third flashback we get of them together. Previously, they mentioned a movie they wanted to watch together.
Before Saying Goodbye. It was a great hit in the 60s. Have you never heard of it?
No.
My parents brought me to the cinema to see it. As soon as we got home, my father taught me how to play the theme song on the piano.
Would you like it if we were to watch it together one day?
So Celeste gets the movie, and then they just start dancing? What the fuck? Did they rehearse this? They're supposed to be going along with the dance in the film, which is an original film the director made for this game. But the way the scene is shot and framed, it's genuinely hard to tell. And again, it just feels very weird and unnatural. The scene later is much more poignant and communicates the same exact thing. And again, the dialogue really doesn't help sell their chemistry.
I'm into illegal organ and drug trafficking. In my spare time, I exchange sex for cigarettes.
Nice. I was expecting more like controversial political activist, promoter of black slavery and preservation of the Aryan race.
Only in my spare time.
Look at these kitties, Mike, I'm a rat-a-tat for living.
Maybe they fell in love so fast because they're legit the only two girls in this entire establishment. I would have liked it more if there were other people, so there's this communal sense throughout the space, like in the Suspiria remake, but Celeste and Lynn still pick each other out of the crowd, you know? And maybe the other girls could lead to some interesting set pieces where you're running from a horde of possessed girls or something. But in any case, Celeste and Lynn are all they've got. There's Andrea, the groundskeeper person thing. There's Ashman, the resident rapist who owns the facility. And there's this one other woman named Eliza. I think she's a woman. I don't think she's a teenager. At the end of the story, it's revealed that Lynn is one of the Red Nuns. There are two of them. The other one, of course, is Gloria from Tormented Fathers, but the camera, lingers on her face as if it's some kind of big reveal.
Gloria! You...
Damn! You... all this time!
So I'm thinking maybe Gloria and Eliza are the same person? But we know nothing about Eliza before this point, so if they are the same, it's hardly an interesting reveal, and it's more convoluted than I feel like thinking about. So I buried the lead a little bit there. The owner of the hotel is Ashman, a rapist. This is fun. So it turns out Ashman is Gloria's brother, and he used to molest Gloria when he was little, so the family sent her to the convent, which basically protected him by showing favoritism, which eventually landed him the ownership of the hotel. Ashman didn't stop there, however. He fell in love with another woman who later married X, who was living as a man at that point. Ashman, to get jealous vengeance on X for taking his unrequited love and to show X that they were just a pussy.
Felton deserved it. How could I have known that he was still capable of conceiving? I thought that fucking him was enough to remind him that he is just a pussy, and to punish him for stealing Ariana from me.
God, this fucking dialogue. Raped X, who was still capable of conceiving at the time, and consequently gave birth to Celeste. So if you're following, Ashman and X are Celeste's biological parents, and Ashman still hates X, X's wife, and Celeste because of his entitled, jealous, red pill incel bullshit. You'll notice that while they're stalking you, the characters' taunts are incredibly gendered. That is, when the characters aren't just straight up dumping exposition in the middle of gameplay.
The red nuns were used as lab rats, and then burned alive to bury the evidence. It's through the ticking on the loudspeaker that he manages to control all of us.
Honestly, when they do this, it makes me feel like their cutscene dialogue is playing when it shouldn't be. But anyway, Ashman will call Celeste a slut and a whore.
You're just like your mother, a filthy bitch!
And Andrea will broadly call all girls filthy, which I'm reading as insulting their sexuality.
I'm disgusted by you and all the girls of your generation.
But it's strange because aside from Celeste's growing attachment to Lynn, Celeste's sexuality isn't a subject of the story at all. But there's this weird disconnect where you start to feel like Ashman is sexually pursuing Celeste, even though he's not.
How did you manage to enchant me? She's just like Felton. That whore. You're exactly the same as your slutty mother. All you pussies. You're all the same.
Obviously, Ashman's projecting his sexual rage from Celeste's non-biological mother, who he's still infatuated with.
Did your mother tell you that you were born because I fucked her?
Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
It was never enough for that fucking whore. The hypnosis, the drugs, her daddy's money, and the company. No. She stole from me the woman I loved. And if that wasn't enough, she stained my family's name.
And what about you? Wasn't fucking your sister enough for you?
Don't you dare talk about Gloria that way!
God, I hate this dialogue. Or maybe it's just the delivery. I don't think it's all that bad, except for the frequent microphone clipping from all the screaming. Jennifer is one of 15 girls who were all kidnapped for the purposes of being groomed to undo Wyman's control over the other thralls. All the other girls failed. It's presumed they died because they don't show up in the story except for these missing girl Easter eggs found on milk cartons throughout the hotel. The weird thing is, when Celeste breaks the loop or whatever, Lynn's all berating like, "Oh my god, why did you do that? That's what they wanted you to do."
Why did you do it? I don't understand. I ended the sequence. You're free.
That's exactly what they wanted you to do. The exact reason why you ended up in this fucking place. In one way or another, Porcelain kept us all guarded. Someone else will take his place now. And it's going to be 10 times worse.
But like, aside from just a few lines from Eliza, it doesn't seem like they're doing all that much to steer her in the right direction. And the final villain cutscene is all over the place. Like the villains are just lining up to get fucked.
It's all because of you! I'll make you pay!
Stay back! Stay back! I beg you!
Then you get the choice to either kill Ashman or save him, by which the game actually means to keep him trapped in the van, which is the preferable option since he wants to die. I don't know why it's presented in such an ambiguous way. Then you get a pretty heartwarming outro.
Am I speaking with Celeste Felton?
Who are you?
I'm calling on behalf of Miss Lindsay. She is very weak now and has asked to see you.
Chen.
And despite the fact that they knew each other for such a short time, it's cute. It's really cute. And honestly, it's kind of nice that they're not forcing this into a trilogy. But the last lingering question I have regarding this series is, why does Lynn suddenly become British in this one scene?
We are in deep trouble. Can't you see? Let's leave our troubles here. Let's leave. We can start over. I can't do it. I can't do it. What about us? The contest. Do you not understand? You have to leave. Holy shit, Lynn, no.
Is that a side effect of the moths? Sometimes horror isn't something you escape. Sometimes it's something to which you give in. I don't know why I'm mentioning this. It just seemed like a cool way to close out the video. Anyway, so what do we do with Remothered? Aside from the constant jump scare attempts and the insane audio dynamics, I really like Tormented Fathers. It's short, it's sweet, and despite narratively not seeming like it's saying all that much, it was a fun game to play through twice. Broken Porcelain, on the other hand, gets kind of lost in its own ambition and doesn't get wacky or crazy enough to make the roller coaster feel worth it. My first playthrough of Tormented Fathers was longer than my first playthrough of Broken Porcelain, but Broken Porcelain still feels longer, mostly due, I think, to the uneven pacing, overall linear world design, and hand-holdy set pieces. But graphically and cinematically, there's some cool shit going on here, and the games are more or less mechanically sound. More mechanically sound than my game, in any case. And there's some brilliant use of mocap, at least I think it's mocap. Music's pretty nice. I like the tense, complex dissonance of the first game more than the kind of annoying, almost Western-sounding theme of Broken Porcelain. I'm interested to see what Chris Darrell and Stormmind Games get up to outside of this series. In my experience, story tends to take a backdrop when you're struggling to make a game function properly. Certain things get cut, other things get fleshed out, and other things stitched together, and it's not necessarily a sign of laziness, as some people assume, but just a necessary evil of trying to tell a complete, ludonarratively cohesive story in this medium. So maybe without the restraints of this particular world, Darrell and Stormmind can make something really special and really cool. Hello guys, this is the stupidest framing. Hey guys, I'm still here in the underground. So I just wanted to close out the video. Sorry if you hear squeaking and screeching. It's because I have a hamster, and she's very rude and also very active at 3 in the fucking morning. Her name is Rosie. She's really cute, but also, come on. Yeah, thank you for watching this video. Sorry it took so long. I actually didn't expect this video to be this long. But this is how it turned out. I guess I had a lot more to say about Remothered than I thought I would. I kind of realized I need to be... I was trying to keep a monthly schedule where I'm like releasing one video a month. And I realized like that's not that it's not tenable. It's just that for me specifically, I'm a very passionate creative. I need to really care about what I'm creating. And I need to really be emotionally invested. And if I'm trying to keep to a schedule, it kind of saps that out of it for me. So I needed to be in the right mindset. And I decided at some point, I was like, I'm not going to try to force the video to be done in a month if I'm not feeling it. I'm working on so many other projects. I'm working on a Soul Calibur project. I'm doing an update for my Dreams game, which I mentioned in the video. And the update is, of course, because everything I create turns out like this, the update is turning out a lot bigger than I thought it would be. Instead of just 2 new bosses, it's like it's like 1 new boss and then a whole new scenario with like its own puzzles and everything that I'm trying to do, and new monsters and stuff. And I'm working on, other stories and stuff like that, my children's story. I'm working a lot of stuff, and I figured, I'm not going to try to force a YouTube video to be done in a month if I am not emotionally there right now. If I'm working on other stuff, that's fine. And I hope you guys are okay with that. Like I'm more of a 3-dimensional person than just a YouTube creator. So I hope you're all right with that. I also am going to show off I've been on a bit of a figure collecting spree, like collecting a bunch of anime figures, and I really like them, and they're great, and some of them are heckin' expensive. So if you want to support my figure collecting addiction, I do have a Ko-Fi page where you can support me. I don't have any like special perks or anything for the Ko-Fi, except for if I release a video that's like on a sex game or something, you will get the uncensored version of that video on the Ko-Fi page. But other than that, like I don't have any super special perks. I don't really like timing things out, like we're having early access content. I don't really like that. I don't like the idea that, if you pay, you get the video early. It's just kind of shitty to me. I don't know. Anyway, I'm a little bit drunk, so I'm recording this well after I've edited. I finally finished editing this fucking video. I'm so happy. And I'm recording this well after that. So the video should be going up in a few days. Yeah, I had a lot of fun exploring that abandoned complex. It's not just one building. It's a whole series of buildings. And I haven't even explored the whole thing. I want to go back again one day. It's really fun. It's also fun thinking you're going to die the whole time. I'm having a time of it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to take like a tiny little break, and then I'm going to work on some more videos for you. I'm still, believe it or not, working on my Death Stranding analysis video. I haven't stopped working on that ever. I've been working on it pretty kind of infrequently, but I have been chipping away at it slowly but surely. And and so I'm I'm hoping to get it out eventually. It's definitely something that's still in the works. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one, and please take care of yourselves out there. I hope you're all doing very well.